You're listening to the Cookbook Love Podcast with Maggie Green, episode number 301.
Welcome to the Cookbook Love Podcast, a podcast that celebrates cookbook readers, buyers, collectors, writers, and clubs. And now your host, cookbook author, culinary dietitian, and cookbook writing coach, Maggie Green.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Cookbook Love Podcast. How's everybody doing today? It's Thursday, and I just returned from my weekly grocery shopping, got everything put away, and here I am now introducing the new episode that we have coming up for this week. But before we get started, just a couple of thoughts and announcements that I want to share with you. First of all, back in January, I started taking a picture of all the groceries I bought every week. And I have a folder on my iPhone of my weekly grocery purchases. And if you're in the process of writing a cookbook, something that I found really helps is having photos of the brands and things that I buy, and things that I buy like over and over again. So just a thought there that if you do regular grocery shopping, or even if you get groceries delivered on a regular basis, you might want to snap a picture of them, put them in a folder on your phone, and you can scroll back through and see the kinds of things that you're buying, how often you're buying it, brands that you're perhaps buying, vegetables that you lean toward using a lot, fruits that you tend to buy a lot, what kind of meat you're buying, cheeses, and perhaps how your eating habits or things that you're purchasing have changed over time. I think that's also fascinating. One thing that I know to be true about the way that I shop, it's a whole lot different than the way I used to shop a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago. And that's mainly because I'm only really feeding now myself and my husband, Warren, and we just eat pretty simply, and we don't eat a lot of snacks, and I buy like different kinds of plant-based milks for myself, and buy tofu and tempeh to eat. And I don't buy as much meat because we have a subscription to a way that we get meat delivered in another way. But I think it's fascinating just to see how what we buy for ourselves changes, and to actually reflect back to us what we are shopping for. And is what I'm buying and what I'm cooking with a reflection of the book that I'm perhaps working on, the recipes that I'm working on, the next book project that I'm headed into? Because I always believe that if we're writing a personal book about something that we're doing, it needs to be a reflection of what's going on in our kitchen right now. So that's the first thing. I hadn't shared that with you, but gosh, we're already into June. So if I go every week, 4 times a month, let's say, buy our weekly groceries, I probably have so far a couple of vacations we've been on, let's say 22 photos of food. And I just arrange it on the counter right before I put it away, snap a couple quick pictures with my phone, and save it in a folder. So that's been a really fun thing to do. And the second thing is just to update you on Cookbooks on KDP. Cookbooks on KDP is the program where I help cooks and bakers learn how to self-publish their recipes and stories in a book on Amazon. We started the program in March. We have been meeting every week for either office hours or for live teaching since the middle of March, and we are finishing up this month in June. It's very exciting. We're currently working on their book covers, book interiors, and the group that I have had this past time, and even the one obviously before, a lot of amazing people. So fascinating to see them harness their ideas and turn them into a book that they're going to publish on Amazon. We're getting ready to order the first proof of the first draft of our books. It's always nice to see what we're doing actually printed out so that we can hold it and do some editing and then go back and make changes on our proof copies. But if you're interested in learning how to publish your recipes and stories in a book using Kindle Direct Publishing on Amazon, head on over to www.cookbookwritersacademy.com/KDP. Get yourself on the wait list, and you'll be one of the first people to know when we open the doors again for the next round of cookbooks on KDP. In my other program for people who are working on traditional publishing, we started our 90-day accelerator yesterday. This is a summertime, in-depth look at all the pillar content inside Get Paid to Get Published. And yesterday we talked about our responsibility 100% for the results that we get in our cookbook writing. And we talked about something called the Dunning-Kruger effect, where we come into a program usually highly confident. And then as we learn what we need to do, sometimes our confidence drops. But as our competence starts to increase, our confidence will increase again. And I think the message to my students is, and this is true for you too, if you're working on a project that takes an investment of time to do, is not to lose heart when your confidence starts to drop, because you learn what is in front of you in terms of writing a cookbook proposal and pitching it to an agent or a publisher. An amazing group of people in the Get Paid to Get Published program. The accelerator yesterday was a lot of fun. I will welcome everybody who's new in the program that joined when I opened the doors in May, and I'm looking forward to spending time with them over the next 90 days studying the mindset of writing a cookbook, as well as the 4 main pillars in the program, which are building our platform, creating a concept, writing a proposal, and pitching that to an agent or a publisher. And the third thing is that I see a common thread in both of these programs, and even in myself, when I think about writing a cookbook and getting published. And I have been contemplating writing a 5th cookbook. I think I maybe have told you that before. And part of me, I don't wonder if I have what it takes to write the cookbook, but at the root of everything that we do, and I kind of talked about this last week with my 300th episode, in that 7 levels deep question of why. At the base of everything that we do, cookbook writing, running a business, getting published, I think a lot of us question whether we're really worthy of the success that we are after or the success that we are experiencing. So if you're ever thinking about writing a cookbook or getting published and you wonder if you're really worthy of that, I just want you to know that, coming from my heart to you, that we all have this question. It's the baseline question that almost every human wonders about for everything that they ever face in terms of success and in terms of publishing. A lot of times you'll hear this talked about as imposter syndrome. Am I worthy of this book deal? Am I worthy of this book contract? Why do they look more worthy and like they're more worthy of it than I am? But this is just a fear that we all have. And I have come to the realization that I am 100% worthy of a book deal. I'm 100% of success from selling and writing cookbooks, and that you are too. And when we can believe that to be true with ourselves and with the work that we're doing, and we can build on that foundation to authentically pitch to a publisher the work that we do in our kitchens, the way that we can help people through the cooking and baking and teaching that we do, we really do start to build a foundation built on our own trust in our own worthiness and deservedness of success. So those are my announcements and little lead in to today's episode, which was a great episode that I recorded with Karen Katz. Karen has worked in food television in a variety of areas, from food competition shows, lifestyle shows, documentary, reality television, children's and music and variety TV. She just completed her first book, Getting Sauced: How I Learned Everything I Know About Food from Working in TV. This is a memoir about Karen's life behind the scenes, working with some beloved chefs, Emeril Lagasse, Julia Child, Bobby Flay, and Buddy Valastro, just to name a few. Today on the podcast, Karen and I discuss why she wrote her memoir, what she learned from working in television, highlights of her years at the Food Network, and why food shows are so popular. Karen shares her advice with everyone who wants to get on a cooking show or maybe thinking about a cooking show, the value of promoting books on TV, and why she included recipes in her memoir. So I haven't done a lot of interviews with people who've written memoir, So this is a great episode for you to listen to, not only about the food television aspect, but how Karen summed up all of her stories and experiences and pitched and wrote this book as a memoir. So without further delay, let's dive into this interview with Karen Katz. Hi, Karen. Welcome to the Cookbook Love podcast.
Hey, Maggie. How are you? It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. I'm so excited to talk to you today. I honestly don't think I've had anyone on the show that's going to give us the perspective of food that you are, but I think that it really ties into what people are doing with their cookbooks and their writing of cookbooks and their love of food. But before we get into all that, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Okay. Well, basically, I'm just a nice girl from Long Island who grew up with a mother who had absolutely no interest in cooking. You know, her best friends were the Jolly Green Giant, and Chef Boyardee. But I did have, one skill, which was good, is I love to eat. But, as life is serendipitous sometimes, I found myself becoming executive producer of one of the country's most beloved cooking shows, Emeril Lagasse. And, professionally, I've been a television producer all of my career. I've done everything from children's programming to documentaries and so on. And when I went to the Food Network, this was in the very early days, and cooking shows were not cool. And I really thought taking a job on a cooking show would be the kiss of death to my career. And so I thought, I'll do it for 6 months and we'll see how it goes. And those 6 months turned into 10 years as food TV just exploded. And I was along for the ride. So it's been a great ride. I got to work with some incredible chefs over the years. My shelves are sagging from all the cookbooks that publicists sent me, and I have a real love for them myself. So it's been fun, they're kind of stuck in the aughts, I should say, those particular cookbooks, but I still collect them, currently. And I love to cook. So I really had a very, very lucky career. And, whenever I would go to parties and whatnot, people always loved to hear about it. And I thought, maybe it's a good idea to write it all down. Yeah. And so I did. So I wrote it in my book, Getting Sauced.
Yep. And this is just a book that's out, and you can talk to Karen, obviously, about her career and all the things that she did for the food TV and the shows that she worked on. But it's a great read and fun to learn about it from a book perspective. But how did you serendipitously land with the Food Network? I guess what I'm wondering is how did that, if it was new and it wasn't something that was maybe going to be something you thought might promote your career, how did this kind of job pop up into your an opportunity that you had?
Well, television, like many industries, it's really who you know. And, one job leads to another job. And Eileen Opetut, who was the head of programming at Food Network at the time, I had met her years before. And, she saw my name go by on credits for something. And she said, oh, she might be really good for this show. And the thing about what was going on at Emeril Live, it had just started and there was a lot of backstage drama going on. And because Food Network was so young, they really didn't have TV people there. They had food people, but they were magazine writers or, people who wrote cookbooks, but they had no experience in television. So that's why Eileen wanted me to come. And then the only reason I took it was, two reasons. One was I was a freelancer and I needed a job. Number two was when I met Emeril for the first time, that kind of sold me.
Yeah.
So I really saw the kind of man he was, and we really hit it off. And so that's why I took the job.
Yeah. It's fascinating to me, though, that you thought or had this thought that it might be a career killer. And look what's happened.
Exactly. And there was no way to know that. I mean, but at the time, people would look at you, a cooking show, that was not impressive. But now
I guess people probably think of public access channels where, so-and-so is doing such and such on a public access channel. And that was, and people still do that. And I think there's definitely, I'm not throwing any shade on anything like that, but that experience with Emeril and what he did, like took this food television to like this whole new level that nobody could ever even begin, like you said, to imagine what was going to happen.
Exactly. And, and a lot of that was I had free reign to really do what I wanted to do. And we really took a lot of chances with the show. I mean, most people probably remember the show in studio, and that was a pretty simple format, and we cranked out the shows. But we also did a lot of specials where, the first big one we did was in Grant Park in Chicago in front of 10,000 people. And, that's at the point when, it wasn't long before his popularity exploded, and 10,000 people are chanting his name,
Wow.
in the middle of Grant Park. And it was really extraordinary.
Yeah. Yeah. Sounds like it. So let's step behind the scenes a little bit, behind the camera, to the work that you did and to the people that we don't even see. We see Emeril, but we don't see you. Tell us a little bit about working in food television and what it's like behind the scenes of a show like that.
It's really an interesting process. I mean, all TV has its own, set of people, cameramen and producers and all of that. And certainly food TV does too. So you have a whole group of people who are trying to put on a show. So you have set builders and costume designers, or, for Emeril's clothes or something you might need for the show. You have technicians, lighting, all of the things that, anybody who has any sense of television would have. But there's also a secondary staff, which is the culinary staff. And they're very separate. And there's, to make food on television is nothing like how you make it at home. It starts months before with preparation. I mean, you have to communicate with the chef and the chef's team about what you're going to make. What are the themes of the show? The producing team all works collaboratively with the culinary team in terms of creating what the content of the show. So let's say you have a theme, Thanksgiving, very big, the holidays.
Right.
And, to make a turkey on television, you can't sit there and wait for 4 hours while a turkey cooks. So the culinary team breaks it down into different stages. So you might need 4 turkeys just to show one. For example, the chef will, prep the turkey, what spices he puts on, how to tie the turkey, how to stuff the turkey. Then I'll put it in the oven, and then that one just magically disappears. Then another one comes out that's partially cooked, and so we might baste it, and that's the basting burn. And then that one magically disappears. And then the third one will come out all done and beautiful, and maybe the chef will carve it. And so you get to see, how to do that, the technique. And then the fourth is what we call the beauty shot, where at the end, the cameras will come in and take these luxuriously food pornographic shots of the turkey.
Right.
So all the thought process that goes into that involves people breaking down a recipe in a different way than home cooks would do. It involves shoppers. You have to plan these things days in advance. You need kitchen staff in the offstage kitchen during the course of the show. And then you need the kitchen staff in the commercial breaks who kind of swoop in, like ants at a picnic, and clean the setup and do all those things. So it does employ a lot of people. So, cooking shows are good for the economy.
Yeah. And where was the shows actually recorded and produced?
The Emeril I was on for so long that we had a number of different studios, but the last place that we recorded was at Food Network had studios in Chelsea Market in New York. Mm-hmm. And that was a great place. It was great for the audience. It was great for us.
Yeah.
But we would film at Chelsea Studios.
Yeah. And then they have the camera, the set where people can see what Emeril's doing, and then a whole nother kitchen like off to the side to
A matter of fact, Food Network Kitchens is on the same floor, but it was its own kind of entity. And they started doing all of their web stuff in there, and then sometimes little short pieces get produced there. So that even became its own set at one point.
That's interesting. How long did the Food Network? Are they still at Chelsea Market?
No.
No.
They're no longer there, and they do. They have a lot of outside production companies that do. Most of their stuff are done off property.
I gotcha. And how far in advance would you plan your content for the shows? Like if you knew you were doing a Thanksgiving show, when did the actual planning for that episode start?
Well, we were on. We had 90 shows a year to do,
Wow.
and we would shoot 9 weeks over the. We would shoot 10 shows. Excuse me. We would shoot 10 shows over a week's time.
Wow.
9 times a year, and we'd have about a month to prepare for each.
I see. So you were doing little blocks of shows, and you would prepare for 10. You'd say 10 in a week.
Yeah, because of Emeril's schedule.
Yeah, he did other things. I guess he didn't just like show up every
morning, no.
Right, and cook. Yeah.
Yeah. And
that
we
must
would
have been kind of rigorous though to do 10 in a week. It's kind of interesting. That's more than one a day.
That's 2 a day. I mean, it's only Monday through Friday.
Yeah, that's true.
In the beginning, we did 3 a day.
Wow.
And that almost killed us.
Yeah.
So, and 3 different audiences, they were very long days. And we finally got it down to 2 a day, which was also exhausting. I mean, you'd feel like a train had hit you by the end of the week.
Yeah. Did all of his shows have a live audience?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Emeril Live was always live.
Right.
But he had other shows. He had Essence of Emeril and some other shows, which were, just him cooking.
Yeah. And when it started as Emeril Live.
Well, he started actually, his first show on Food Network, I believe, was How to Boil Water.
Wow.
And he was a very young chef out of New Orleans. And it was just a dump and stir show, just cooking.
It's funny. I can remember I had a job at the time that show started. And a woman that I worked with, I've always had food service background. I was actually a food service director at a large retirement facility. And I remember the lady that I worked with coming to me specifically because I was probably in charge of the food service. She said, I just watched a cooking show on television and it's this young chef. And she said, I've been watching it regularly and my husband and I really like it. And she told me it was Emeril. And of course I hadn't really heard of Emeril. I hadn't really traveled to having his restaurants or anything. And so I can distinctly remember in my work life, someone being influenced in a positive way by that show when it very first started. And of course, as the years went on, we would have more and more conversations about Emeril, how the show grew, how it changed, how it evolved. So I kind of find having a little bit of a flashback here talking to you about memories from this side of the, someone who actually from a watching perspective, watching that show develop. And of course, now where food TV is today is just, he was kind of like the beginning of all of it, wasn't he? At least for the Food Network.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, to make what he did, and I think, he hasn't gotten enough credit for this, but he really brought cooking to the masses. For a while, it was really a very elitist thing. And, he got kids cooking and men cooking, and he just, kind of lit a match under everybody.
And it gave people permission to enjoy it in a way that they maybe hadn't done it before. And it took that whole stigma away that you were even concerned about whether this was going to be a career killer. It just changed everything in terms of how people looked at food and the culinary arts and cooking.
Yeah, and a lot of, it's interesting because, so many chefs were on the show, and every time one of the younger chefs would come in, they grew up with Emeril Live, and they really revered Emeril, and many of them will say, he's the first one who got me interested in cooking.
Yeah, yeah. So how does it feel to be part of that revolution?
It's, when you're in it, you don't really understand what's happening, but with the years and some perspective, it really was a thrilling time. I'm very proud to have been a part of it. We had a great time doing it, and it's and I'm happy for Emeril. I think now he's getting the recognition that he really deserves.
Yeah. So what is it about food shows just in general then that make them something that everyone is enjoying watching?
It's funny you should say that because I often wonder, people, you can't smell it and you can't taste it. So what is it?
I know,
And,
right?
but it is, I think, when they say you eat with your eyes, I think that's absolutely true. And the emotions and the psychic energy and all of the things that are associated with food come through television, it comes through art and photography of food, none of which you can taste or smell. However, you can, in some sense, in your brain you can. So if someone's pouring hot chocolate over ice cream, you know what that sensation is. And so I think it brings up uh, emotion. I think it brings up memory. I think it is a very satisfying thing, and it's a safe space. Food is sort of universal. It's comforting. There's not a lot of aside from competition shows, there's really not a lot of drama behind it. So I think it's a comforting and safe place to be.
Yeah. And I think with reading cookbooks, it's funny that people read cookbooks and enjoy them and maybe don't even cook. And it's kind of the same thing. You can't smell anything yet. You don't taste
Right.
anything. But I do think that there is a way that people can enjoy the food without actually having the food in front of them. And I think that if anything, the reading about it and then watching it on TV, I think there is that parallel because it's a foodless atmosphere. It's just this whole imagination. I've talked on the podcast about this before. There are people that enjoy maybe watching gardening shows or reading gardening books, but they don't garden. They just like the whole, flowers and color and design. And I think food also allows us to enter that space and enjoy. And I think it's kind of, well, like you said, except for the competitions shows, I think it's relatively easy to watch.
Hmm.
Um, barring any illness where have a food aversion, I think it's fun to see people do things with food that maybe you haven't done before. So um, I just love that they have been so popular. And um, what's changed over the years, though? Maybe even in the time that you were working with
Hmm.
Emeril and in food TV, what evolution did you see? And then what do you think is going on now that's so different?
Right. Well, I really did see quite an evolution during my time. I probably was in and out of there for about 13 years. And what was so interesting when I came in, it was just dump and stir shows, that's what we called them, where really it's just a chef behind a counter cooking.
Yeah.
And that was the norm for a very, very long time. And then shows like Top Chef, the really kind of the granddaddy of all the competition shows, and Anthony Bourdain's No Reservations
Mhm.
as a travel show. Those two genres really kind of took off. And what they did very well was combine, like a competition show combines the drama of television and the excitement and the seat of your pants kind of experience. And the travel shows really are armchair travel, and you get to experience food in a totally different way. And it's entertainment, whereas cooking shows are very instructional. Over time they got delegated to the non-prime time hours, more of the instructional time of the day. And then prime time got taken over eventually with all of these competition shows and travel shows because they are entertainment. And, where you think of maybe the mom or dad at home, thinking about dinner, well, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, great time to have a cooking show if people were going to, kind of watch along. But at night, people wanted to just relax. So, for our show, you kind of saw the handwriting on the wall, when a show like Top Chef came along, or Master Chef. And eventually Food Network got their own bunch of competition shows as well. But they were very well produced and done well. And it just was the next level.
Yeah. Yeah. What about people that you saw on the show? I know Emerald was the star, but I bet all kinds of people came and went. And do you have
Oh,
any good stories to tell about an experience with any of the guests on the show?
oh, sure. I mean, we had everybody came on the show. I mean, everyone from Jacques Pepin, Bobby Flay, to we had Aretha Franklin. I mean, if you remember, Emeril Live had music, so we had some incredible performers. But the standout, no question, was when Julia Child came
Yeah.
on the show.
Yeah.
And she, at this point in her life, it was towards the end of her life, she was probably in her late 80s, but I mean, she's a very tall woman, and she had still had that voice, that unmistakable voice. And when she came in and I was introduced to her, she was like, yes, yes, yes. And she wanted nothing to do with me or the production people. She wanted to meet everybody in the kitchen. So
Wow.
she brushed all of us off, but then she went back in the kitchen and she talked to every single cook there,
So
even
sweet.
the dishwashers. And she, was genuinely interested where did they go to culinary school. She wanted to know, what they wanted to do with their life and food. And she was incredible. And it was like the queen had come to the show. I mean, everyone, particularly in the kitchen, had such respect for her. So it was a very, very special. She actually was on twice, and it was incredible.
Yeah. That's amazing that she took the time to go into the kitchen and talk to all the people, because really the show couldn't have happened. It's a team effort. Couldn't have happened without your efforts either. But in terms of the food preparation and the stages that everything had to be done, the people in the kitchen are just like, it's hugely important. And to buy the right ingredients, get them to the right stage of doneness so that Emeril could take it from there and, make it look like a seamless turkey. It's one turkey from beginning to end, but it's really for skill and teamwork. So it's amazing that she recognized that. She obviously, she knows what goes on in a kitchen, and she just was always that way with people in the culinary industry. And it's fascinating that she retained that throughout her entire time that she was writing books and doing her own shows. And I think that her shows on PBS and even Jacques Pepin's shows, were those mostly filmed in their own home?
Oh, that's a good question.
Or did they have a
don't
set film, or
know.
like some of them came out of Boston? Like maybe they had a set in Boston that they did. The
The
Victory Garden.
original,
Yeah.
the original Julia Child show is definitely in a studio. I mean, there's no question. I can't imagine that they would let them in their home. So, I know that Jacques Pepin does now. He does little, videos for social media, but I can't imagine they would do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think as a producer, you probably would know what that would involve, being in someone's home.
Yeah, I mean, it's everything from, there's no room for the lighting, and you have all the, it's just too many people around. So, and also you need a prep kitchen.
Yeah.
So, unless they both had two kitchens in their homes.
Right. Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about your expertise and advice you might have to someone who perhaps wants to get on a cooking show or have their book promoted on a show. What your recommendations are?
Well, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's not so easy. And it has changed in the way how people get cooking shows, for example. Well, there are two things. You either want a cooking show or you have a cookbook to sell.
Right.
So they're two separate
two
things.
Right.
So I'll deal with the cookbook part first.
Okay.
The best bet, and it really is, the power of social media today. I mean, you need, even to get a book published, to get a publisher excited about it, unless you're self-publishing, you need followers. You need people following you. You need to do Instagram, all of those, TikTok, whatever you can think of, to gain an audience and to get some, authenticity and some authority. That's really, really critical. Unless you have, some unique perspective on food, but even that, you would want social media around that. So that's a big hurdle these days. Everybody's doing it, and it's really hard to break through. Now, having said that, if you're a chef, let's say you're not a well-known chef, but you are a chef, you're a professional.
Mm-hmm.
And whether you're a pastry chef or whatever kind of chef you are, and you have solid recipes and beautiful photography, then you have a better shot, certainly, than just someone doing it on their own. There's food styling, and just like with television, I mean, a good cookbook and good photographs from a cookbook, there's an army that's putting that book together. So it's like anything else in life. It's just, you just have to believe in your idea and don't quit. I mean, someone once said to me, what's the difference between a writer and a published author? And a published author is the one that didn't quit.
100%. You have to persevere, and doesn't happen overnight. It is something that you just keep taking the next step forward. And if you want to do it, I think you can eventually get there, but you've made some excellent points. And I think social media is very powerful. Some kind of I think there's so much in terms of ways that we can get the word out about what we're doing, and really valuable. And that of course has changed a lot since I'm sure the show started. Obviously that wasn't something that, Emeril even had to deal with in the very beginning. Promoting it on social media.
Yeah. No, I mean, in the old days, I mean, it was your talent, why was Emeril chosen? Because he was a charismatic personality. You need that too, in terms of still today, you still need that. But in terms of a cookbook, that doesn't hurt, but you need all of the other things as well. Yeah. But to get a cooking show, you need the whole package.
Yeah. And let's talk about the cooking show, but I want you to start with Emeril himself and his humor and his style and the way that he showed up on television and what that did for his popularity.
Well, he's an interesting talent in the sense that, I mean, if you meet Emeril, people always ask me, is he bamming all the time? And he's actually a very quiet, thoughtful guy. I mean, he has that spirit about him. But what comes out on television is really his passion for food. And it's 100% authentic. He sleeps and lives and dreams about food. And I think that is what was so infectious about him and why people were really drawn to him. He loves teaching it. He loves getting people excited about it. And that's really what has been the trajectory the whole time, from when he was just standing behind a stove by himself, on these dump and stir shows, all the way through Emeril Live and, all the shows that he's done since that time. And, what my job was and what I felt, every talent needs different things. And for Emeril, what it was, he just needed to know that everything around him was run like his kitchens. He's very, in the restaurant world, he's a very strict taskmaster, and there's, a right way and a wrong way. And he just didn't want the drama, and he just wanted everything calm and everything to run, in an organized way. And the best thing that I could do for him was to create an environment where he could just be himself. Yeah. And that's what I did.
Yeah. And I think that allows him to be who he authentically was if he was in the environment where in his restaurants he could operate at his best, and the same thing on the show. And I think it's amazing that you saw that was your role, was to, as the producer, creating this environment where Emeril can come in and cook and entertain on television.
Yeah. I mean, he studied. I mean, he knew, we had scripts and we had recipes, and he would go through all of them. But because, the guy knows how to cook, you didn't have to walk him step by step through every part of the process. And he could always save anything. Like if something went wrong, you didn't just pull the plug on him. I only did that once and I regretted it. and he always could figure a good save out. Yeah. Because he knew what he was doing.
Yeah. Yeah. So, if there was someone that came on the show that was a cookbook author or had a book, or even if they didn't have a book, what did an appearance beside Emeril on his show do for them and their career?
It was huge. I mean,
Yeah.
there was no question the day after the show aired, their books just spiked. Anyone, it's a niche audience, and if he was promoting the book and giving it the gold star, there's no question the power of television. Or I don't remember exactly what the numbers were, but whether it's 1 million people seeing your book, that's a lot of people. Even if
Yeah.
1%, buys it, that's 10,000 people.
Yeah. Did Emeril vet the guest, or did he trust you all to pick ones that he would?
There was actually sometimes he'd have suggestions
Yeah.
sometimes, but usually we would vet them, and we got. I mean, I'm not kidding. I have over
Pitches.
500. All the time.
Yeah.
Any cookbook that came out, we were pitched.
Right.
So you had to be discerning. Obviously, we didn't have a ton of at the time. There weren't a ton of celebrity cookbooks, but if he knew the person, then maybe we would do that. But if it was a chef that he knew, and he was comfortable with, it was important to him to feel that whoever it was legitimate and really knew how to cook.
Yeah.
That was sort of the criteria. So you didn't want, sometimes books come out and unfortunately they're not well tested, they're not put together well, they're not from a real chef. So that was part of the distinguishing
Right.
ways in which we
Right.
determined.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you have any memories of someone coming on the show maybe that did have a book that wasn't a a big name, wasn't a chef with a restaurant, that you really feel the Emeril appearance impacted their career?
um Well, actually, we had, I don't think she had a cookbook at the time, but Sunny Anderson
Oh,
had a radio show, and we gave her her first shot. And, she got noticed from that. Chef, there was another one, Chef Jamie Gwen, who now has Food and Wine with Jamie Gwen. She has a number of cookbooks out. She's out in California. And, after her book hit, that was, she was established already, but it certainly didn't hurt.
yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. So, what about advice for someone then that wants to pitch to get on a show? I'm assuming most of the pitches came through PR agents or through
Yeah.
publishers. Um, what if someone self-publishes and they have a successful book that is self-published? Is that still recommended to maybe work with a PR agent to get the book
You,
pitched?
yeah, I think, it's really tough to come in unsolicited,
Yeah,
so whether you have a literary agent or a regular agent or a publicist, usually it's very, very difficult to come in all with none of that.
right.
So, it's just the sheer volume. So it's really a pecking order, unfortunately. I mean, I wish I could say it's something else, but it's not.
Yeah. Yeah. So, in your book, Getting Sauced, I noticed as I was looking through it that you included some recipes. I would love for you to talk to us a little bit about the recipes, why you included them, and if there's any in here that we must try.
Correct. Well, although this book is a memoir, it's really a memoir about my life in food and how I learned to cook from sitting in a control room, basically. I mean, I probably saw over 1,500 hours of food television, so it's hard not to learn something. Um, and as I went through the book, I realized, I talk about specific dishes, whether it was something my grandmother made or whether it was something Emeril made, and as I learned how to cook, how I learned how to put my own spin on things. So I thought it would be fun for the reader, and it was fun for me to add a kind of a specific recipe that went with the chapter. So there's a recipe at the end of each chapter that is reflective of what I was talking about.
Yeah. And any of them anything that we ought to try, or anything unusual that you think might be a recipe in here that you learned from your time there that would be of I don't know. I guess what I'm asking, if there's anything like, I think your perspective on it, like seeing it on television versus like tasting it in someone's house.
Right.
And so you may think, well, I've watched them make this. I'm going to include a recipe for it in my book. Like, what was it that made you decide to pick this recipe and not that recipe?
Well, it's mostly my success in making it, to tell you the truth. For example, there's a recipe for a rack of lamb in there. And the story is funny because, Emeril had made something similar on the show. And I thought it just looked so good. I wanted to try it. So I had, all the recipes in my folder every week. So I would take them home and try them. And the first time I made it, I put it in the oven. It's supposed to, roast for 20 minutes and that should be it. I take it out. It's not done. I put it in for another 20 minutes. And I'm like, well, maybe there was a mistake with the recipe. And it turned out I had bought a rack of pork, not a rack of lamb. Yeah. So I made a little boo-boo. Yeah. And, so it's a funny story, but eventually I did learn how to make it correctly. And I did buy a rack of lamb. So it is the perfected rack of lamb is the recipe in the book.
Yeah. And you have a recipe in here for a feeling sorry for myself grilled cheese sandwich. Now, that's something I would have to try because I don't think there's anything much better in life than a good grilled cheese sandwich.
Well, when times get tough, which is what that particular chapter is about, I reach for cheese, and
Yes.
And this is a really decadent grilled cheese sandwich. It's with brie and brioche, lots of butter, caramelized onions, and sliced apples. And it's really good.
Yeah, it sounds good.
With a side of potato chips, it'll cheer anybody up.
Yeah, I think that sounds wonderful. And then another recipe is Dan's rotisserie huli huli chicken.
Yeah, that's actually a funny story. When we took the show to Hawaii at one point, and everybody, the whole crew was mad at me because I was actually making them work. For some reason, they thought we were on vacation. And one morning we got up and it's early and Emeril, starts sniffing the air and he's like, get in the car. And I'm like, okay. And so kind of like, wimpy after the hamburgers, where he's following the scent and I'm driving. I don't even know where I'm driving. And we turn this corner and we get to the parking lot of a church. And there are these big Hawaiian guys over this enormous Guave wood burning grill, and they're rotisseing these chickens, and they're called huli huli, which means to turn. And Emeril says, hey, aloha, can we buy some? So he buys 3 and he orders me to open up the back of the van, and we put out newspaper, and the entire crew dove into these chickens, which were incredible. It was one of the best chickens I've ever had in my life. So my husband, who's the baker of the family, but he's also the grill man, we've been trying to recapture that flavor of the huli huli chicken. And so this is his recipe.
Very nice. And that's Dan then.
Yes.
Yes.
That's my husband.
Yes. And at the end of one chapter, I found this list for top 10 things for hanging out with chefs. It's at the end of The Company's Coming. And then you said, over the years, I learned the hard way how to hang out with the big boys. Even if you want to live to talk about it the next day, here's my top 10 tips. I thought that some of these were really good. Let's start with number 10. When meeting at a hotel bar before dinner, come late. That way you can skip the first 2 rounds. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, God bless chefs, but they are a lusty bunch, and they, like to drink and they like to eat. And if you think you can hang with them and go one for one, you are going to be sorry. Yeah. So I had to devise ways to go out at night. And so if you would go down to the bar with them, then that's 2 glasses right there. And if you don't go, then you can skip that right away. Yeah. And because there's going to be wine at dinner, and there's going to be after dinner drinks, and then the bar afterwards. So you really have to pace yourself.
Yeah. And number 8 says, don't order a cocktail to start. Multiple bottles of wine will be coming, which you just said. And my advice to you is the same as my father once gave me. Don't mix the grain and the grape.
Yep. Never mix the grain and the grape. Ever, ever, ever.
Yes. So that's very good. And another one was hydrate. This is critical. For every glass of wine, drink 1 glass of water. Helps slow you down. And you're exactly right about this. I think that there's, food, being in the food and beverage and culinary industry, it all just goes together. Like a meal includes all of it, right?
Absolutely.
Appetizers, salads, entrees, side dishes, desserts, cocktails, wine, after dinner drinks. It's the whole thing. And I think that when you do, you're working in the industry as a producer. Everybody just has to learn like how they can operate the best. So I think that's a good one too. Um, one other good one is never put salt on anything you haven't tasted first. It's very bad manners in the chef world. One should assume that the restaurant chef has salted to taste. Besides, your feet will thank you in the morning. Yeah,
it's true. Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. I remember watching, when I've had dinner with chefs and someone pick up the salt. I mean, they cringe.
Right. No, I think you would have to assume in a restaurant that they have done their due diligence and it's tasting like it should when it hits the table. No doubt about it. Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about cookbooks. Now, you said that you, from publicists, got hundreds of cookbooks sent to you over the years, and your shelves are sagging with cookbooks. You're still engaged in buying new cookbooks, reading cookbooks. But I always like to ask people as we're wrapping up if they have a favorite cookbook or two that you'd like to share with our audience.
Well, that's really like asking someone to pick among their children.
I think this is always the hardest question I ask people. I really do.
Well, I kind of put my favorites in categories.
Sure.
For example,
That'd be great.
if I'm stuck on a desert island, what do I want to have? And I probably would say The Joy of Cooking, because it gives you every technique that you need to know. So you may, you don't know what kind of ingredients you may have, but at least it will give you kind of a background. So that's my go-to when I want to really learn how to do something. But other books that I really love, like my latest obsession, is this book called Ripe Figs by Yasmin Khan, which is, kind of Turkish cuisine and Mediterranean. It's just, they're lovely recipes. Maybe, a little different from the kind of palette that I usually cook towards. And everything has worked that I've tried in her book. And so that's my latest one.
Nice.
And I always kind of go to Jose Andres's Tapas, A Taste of Spain. I love tapas. I love Spanish food, and he's got a couple of killer paella recipes in there.
Nice.
So those are just a few. I mean, I could go on, but those are just a few.
Oh, that's great. And I'll link to those in the show notes. It's like I said, a good way for us to not only learn about what you're interested in these days when it comes to cookbooks, but sometimes discovery for our listeners as well. So I appreciate you doing that. I know it's hard. It's a question that sometimes I've had guests that literally they're like, I cannot answer that question. Or they might have a collection of family recipes, which is very sweet, that they really value and treasure. So, and I know the publicists, it's fun to get cookbooks sent to, I get cookbooks sent for the show. You got cookbooks sent. And I just think it's always amazing every time a book arrives, when I think about the person behind it that, invested their time and energy in creating the books, and just love receiving them. And it's been great to talk to you as you added the side of the story that's still actually very popular, thriving, which is all the food television that's going on. And you even augmented that with the discussion about, TikTok and Instagram and Reels and all the things that people are doing in video. And it really has opened up the way that we're experiencing food. So I think it's great that you wrote the book, sharing the memories with us, and coming on the show to tell us more about your experience with Emeril. I'd like to share with everyone how they can maybe connect with you online, and tell us a little bit about how they can get a copy of your book.
Sure. Well, the title of the book is Getting Sauced: How I Learned Everything I Know About Food from Working in TV. And it's published by Morgan James Publishing, and you can get it anywhere online books are sold, and hopefully it should be in all the bookstores now. And if, please feel free to come over to me. My website is thecatztales.com, and it's the KATZTALES.com. So a little play on words there. And you can find me on Instagram at the Katz Tales.
Very nice. I will link to both of those in the show notes as well.
Thank you.
Well, Karen, best of luck with your book. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today. And I hope you have a great month, a lot of fun. And I'm going to have to go tune into some cooking shows. And I watch them sometimes. It's funny. Where I see them the most is like if I'm getting my hair cut sometimes, or it seems like food shows are on a lot. I'm looking forward to paying attention to what's going on in that arena. And thanks for bringing us up to date on everything that you've seen over the years. Really appreciate it.
Well, it's been my pleasure, Maggie. It was great chatting with you.
Thank you so much for joining us today for this episode of the Cookbook Love podcast. Again, all the links can be found in the show notes at www.cookbooklove.co. And if you are interested in writing a cookbook of your own, please check out the free cookbook writing masterclass called How to Get Paid to Write a Cookbook. It is designed specifically for food or nutrition experts, and you can check that out at www.cookbookwritersacademy.com/free. So that's it for today's episode of the Cookbook Love podcast. This is your host, Maggie Green. And until next time, have a great day and keep loving your cookbooks.
Thanks for listening to the Cookbook Love podcast. You can find out more information at www.cookbooklove.co.